All right, guys. So what today's lesson is about is talking about how things are classified and the value of that. And so you guys just finished up the last unit where we were learning about all types of living things and what sort of characteristics they have, as well as what are the needs of living things. For this unit, we're learning about how do you actually put things into groups. And there's a lot of science that goes behind that. And so this is some of the notes that you guys are going to be taking down based on the worksheet or the packet, the notes packet that you guys are given in class. And so if you look, the main reason for why we classify things is it makes our understanding of things much easier. And so if we classify things, we can actually put them into groups that then make it easier for us to understand a little bit more about those groups. So let's take a few notes on this. So if you're following along with your packet, you can understand that it makes things simpler, and it just makes a lot more sense when we can actually classify things. And so the actual definition of classify is just to put things into categories. And one of the first things that we learn about whenever we're doing this is the word species. And it's actually a pretty complex thing, because a species is actually its own thing that can reproduce with other members of its own species. And because of that, species are kind of set apart in terms of classification. And so any species is an organism that can mate with another member of its same species. So in that definition, one of the things that you see is the word fertile. And the word fertile here, and go ahead and write this down in your notes. The word fertile means that it's able to reproduce. All right, so if something's fertile, it's able to reproduce, which is really important because things that are able to reproduce are able to carry on to new generations. So anything that's a species is something that's able to reproduce with another member of its same species, and then those offspring can also continue to do that. But there's a difference here between that and something we call a hybrid. All right, a hybrid is a cross between two separate species. So a cross between two different species whose offspring do not produce fertile offspring. All right, another way to say that is just a hybrid is when you have two different species, when they mate and they have some offspring, those babies cannot have babies down the road. And so very generally, a hybrid is something different. Hybrid is different than a species because when you get two separate sets of DNA, in other words, you have DNA that's different enough from one another in terms of having two different species, those types of DNA don't match up in the way that they need to make something that's able to survive in many generations into the future. And so hybrids are kind of set apart. This is different from, all right, two different words that you guys have probably heard before. Breeds, all right, which are things that we talk about for dogs and cats. And races for people. All right. The word breed and the word race, these actually relate to members of the same species. So this is very different than a hybrid or than anything else. So all the human species, we all fall into the category of being Homo sapiens. All right. So these all are not the same thing as a hybrid. All right. They relate to all of these organisms are in the same species within their own category. All right. Not saying cats and dogs and people are all the same. So with this, we're going to talk about the way that how we classify things actually came to be. So there were a couple key players in that, and I'm going to scroll down. And once again, if you're taking notes on this and you need more time, you can always pause and then go ahead and copy that along. All right. So there were a couple key players in this. The first one being this guy named Aristotle. And Aristotle came along, and he classified things based on how they move. And things move by flying, they move by walking, they move by swimming. And so he noticed all these different creatures, and he put them into those categories. But pretty quickly, he started to find that there were some issues with that. Or that scientists later on down the road started to find that there were issues with that. And so they started to find new ways. And one of the people who came up with the most prominent way of changing this was a guy named Carolus Linnaeus. All right, Carolus Linnaeus is a 17th century scientist, and he mainly tried to classify plants and animals. And he came up with what's called the Linnaean taxonomy. All right, or it was named more aptly after him. And so he actually invented this, and it goes in a series of, it goes in a certain order. And so it starts with the largest group that we call a domain. And then it goes to a kingdom. And then getting smaller still, it goes to a phylum. Then a class. Then a family. Then an order. Then a genus. Then a species. And what happens is, with each of these groups, you go from the largest group to the most specific. So on the side of your page, I want you to draw an arrow going up and down. And at the top, I want you to write largest and the least specific. Okay, so the largest and the least specific. On the bottom, I want you to write the smallest. All right, but this is the most specific. Okay, the smallest group and the most specific group. And the reason why this is important is because of the fact that when you're in the largest group, that means you are a really large category that encompasses a lot of different things. So domains, there's only 3 of these that we're going to learn about here soon. And there are all organisms on Earth, all right, whether you're bacteria or whether you're an animal or a plant, all of these fit into 3 domains. So they're very, very large. But they're very not specific. They are very, in terms of what sort of things fit inside of them, there's a lot of differences within the organisms that fit inside each domain. Whereas as you travel down the list and you get all the way to the level of a species, this is talking about one very specific thing. So if we look over to our example here, it says, what is the animal that's being described here? And if you follow along, it goes through things like the Animalia kingdom, the phylum Chordata, the class Mammalia, the order Carnivora, the family Felidae, the genus Panthera, and then the species Leo. And in this case, it creates the scientific name known as Panthera leo. So if you think you know the answer to what this common name of this organism might be, feel free to jot it down. But it is actually an African lion. So where it says what animal is being described, I want you to write African lion. All right, or you could also write it down here, that's fine as well. So an African lion is the common name for that, whereas Panthera leo is the scientific name. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Same sort of thing, guys. If you need to copy this down and you need some more time to do it, just hit pause on the video and then you can hit play again when you need to move on. So for this next part, we're going to talk about this idea of what is a binomial name. And so all scientific names have what's called a binomial name. So here, oh, and actually, I apologize. So one of the things that comes with this is you need to be able to remember the list of things that fall into the category of Linnaean taxonomy. So you need to remember the order of domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And you need to remember it in that order. And one of the ways you can do that is by using something called a mnemonic device. So in this space here, I want you to take a minute after I give you an example to come up with your own mnemonic device. Here are 2 that can help you to remember this order. Do kings play cards on 4 green stools? And the second one is dancing kangaroos play catch over fine green sheets. So those are both, once again, kind of silly sentences, but what a mnemonic device is meant to do is to help you to figure out how you can remember a list of things by putting them in sentence form. So you use the first letter of each name. Domain starts with a D, so you use that first letter. And then you go down that list and you come up with a sentence. And it can be as goofy as you want. Of course, make it class appropriate. But I want you to write your own example here. So you can take a minute to do that, pause the video, and do it. As we get to the binomial nomenclature, what this is a really big word. It's a mouthful of a word. But what this is this looks at the idea of what is a scientific name. And so binomial literally just means two names. Binomial literally just means two names. And what happens in science is that because of the way that Carolus Linnaeus developed his system, he gives each name of something, each organism two names. He gives it a genus and a species. So one example of this is what we call Chelonia mitis. This is a scientific name for a turtle. Go figure. And what this turtle is this, or what this name is the scientific name. Okay, so this is the scientific name of a common turtle species. The way that we call it in a common way, or the common name as we call it, is a green sea turtle. Alright? And this is the common name for this species. But a lot of times in science, we don't like to communicate only using common names because we're oftentimes communicating around the world with different languages. So we communicate using a scientific name, which is something that science all over the world agrees on. And so in this case, we would use, if we were writing in a scientific paper, we'd use the term Chelonia mitis. This first word is the genus. The second word is the species. If you'll notice, the genus is always going to be capitalized, whereas the species name is always going to be in lowercase. So take a minute. If you look over here at the common names, you'll notice that there's 6 common names and there are 6 scientific names. And I want you to try and see if you can match any of these up. And before you actually listen to this portion, pause the video here and see if you can match these up and see how you're doing. And I'm going to hit pause on mine so you can actually see the end result. Okay, so I started to write a couple of these. The first one is the Bengal tiger. The Bengal tiger matches up with Panthera tigris. Once again, the word tigris in there hopefully gives you a bit of a hint. The next one, the Asian elephant, is Elaphus maximus. Now there's kind of 2 ones that look like it might be an elephant, but there's a separator later on that I'll show you. The moon moth is Actias luna, and you can get that because lunar is the word for moon. African elephant matches up with the Loxodonta africana. Once again, you see the word Africa in both. Human being, I'm going to skip one. Human being is Homo sapiens. And red-eared slider turtle, this is the hardest one in the bunch, goes with Trachemes scripta. All right, the one that kind of stands out. There's not really a clear indicator that it should be that. So once again, when you match all these up, this hopefully shows you that some of these words are connected together by similar sounding words. Now, the last thing I want you guys to think about is how these names actually come to be. And most of these names come from 2 different languages. All right, so 2 languages. They come from the languages Latin and Greek. All right, Latin and Greek. And so these 2 languages come together to form all of the scientific names that we know of for classifying living things. Now, after you're done listening to this section of notes, and make sure you have all of it copied down on the right-hand side of your note paper, and make sure you save that. We're going to be discussing it more next class, and we'll go from there. Thanks, guys.